You are absolutely going to love today's video because I am making this slab of dry flowers, and I'm going to be making the mold out of foam. That's right, foam. So let's jump right in. So I have a sheet of foam here. This is probably an inch thick, if I'm not wrong, and probably an A3 size. And I also have this electric foam cutter, so that's what I'm going to use to cut out the shape in this. A disclaimer, I do not know how any of this is going to go down, so we're going to have to figure this out as we go along. So first thing I'm going to do is use a marker and make a rough shape that I want to cut, and I'm going for an irregular slab kind of a shape, so there's nothing too particular in mind. I'm just going to draw this out, and if I'm happy with it, that's what I'm going with. And I think I'm happy with what I've drawn out, so the only thing left to do is now cut through it. So once this gets hot, it is quite easy to precisely move it along the foam and cut it to size, because essentially what it does is burns through the foam. Make sure you have your mask on when you're doing this, and if you don't have this, I suppose you could go in with your blade or cutter and cut out foam. I would imagine it might get a little messy, but you still might be able to get a nice clean line that way. But for me, it was oddly satisfying using this. So I have my shape out, and I'm going to save the actual shape for something later, because I'm pretty sure I might be able to use it for something. But for now, I need to make this into a mold. So my first thought is to use some plastic, and if I heat up the plastic, maybe it will take the form of the edges of this mold, and then that way I don't have to worry about making a mold or worry about, resin sticking to it. But as soon as I start, I realize this isn't going to work, because it's going to come out all crinkly and not very nice. And that's okay for like a water effect, but for a kind of effect that I want the mold to be quite flat. And so I instantly realized this isn't going to work. So then what I do is get out my HDPE form. This form is from EpoPro. I will link them in the description below, and it is an absolutely amazing form to cast such projects and even like coffee tables and river tables. So what I'm going to do is place this on here, and I'm going to use some silicone and go around and seal the inside of this mold. Now, the silicone that I had was quite old and it wasn't coming out as quickly and properly as it should. So this got a little messy, but I did get there eventually. And what I'm doing now is just using my fingers to dab some water around and sort of spread it across and make sure all of that foam is covered with a layer of silicone, because I don't want any resin to be on the foam. Because A, it will stick to it, and B, it could also kind of burn through the foam as it gets hot when it's curing. And next I'm going to go ahead and tidy up the silicone, because like I said, I did not do a very good job of this. Okay, so my silicone is now set. I can go ahead and mix up my resin. I'm using J Addiction Official's resin, and I'm going to mix it up. And because I want this project to be bubble free, I'm going to go ahead and pop it in my airless bubble removal machine by Resiners. I will link both the resin and this machine and my discount codes in the description for you. So I have just poured in a layer of clear resin into this. I'm going to let that sit just for a few minutes for the bubbles to come up to the surface, and then I'm going to start putting in my dry flowers. And once again, this is another satisfying bit that I loved. I'm just placing these, the way they look appealing to me, and just taking a nice mix of colors in there, and you can't go wrong with this step. And once I'm happy with all the flower placements, I'm going to leave it to cure for a good few hours. Okay, so it's been about 3.5 hours since I put down the layer of resin. So it is still tacky, not fully cured, which is a good time to come in and pour my next layer. One thing I did do was I added my logo acrylic bit in there, so in a corner, so that's in there in this layer. And in this layer, I have added a black tint. So essentially what I want this to be is like a ghosty gray kind of a tint. So that's what I'm going to mix, and I'm going to pour all of this on top. I'm going to pop the bubbles and I'm going to leave this to cure. Right, so that has now been sitting for another couple of hours, so I'm ready for my third layer of resin. Once again, I have added a black tint. I think I'm going to go a couple of drops more in this batch of black, and I'm going to pour it along and pop bubbles, leave it to cure. And we are back for the fourth layer of this pour, and it seems like rinse and repeat process at this point. But yeah, did the same thing, mixed up my resin, added my tint. I have gone even darker at this stage, and I'm just gonna cover the entire thing up to the top. So now all that resin is down, and we have no clue if this is gonna unmold and if this whole thing has worked. So fingers crossed. Okay, so it's the next day and the resin is now hardened. I do have a bit of an overspill just in that corner, maybe because my board wasn't leveled or I actually did overfill it. I'll deal with that later. I'm trying at the moment to just loosen the form, and ideally I want to save this form, so I'm going to try and remove it without breaking it. But if that's not possible, then I'm just going to go in and rip it. So we'll see how we get on. Also, make sure you like, comment and sub if you enjoy content like this. It really helps support my channel, and I generally just love to hear from you guys. So make sure you engage and leave me a comment and press that bell notification to get notified every time I post a new video. Okay, so I think I've loosened up pretty much most of the board, and the only thing that's holding this down now is that overspill hang. So I have gone in and kind of lifted that to make sure that I don't break this. And yeah, I was finally able to get it out. It wasn't too bad. I just had to go easy with it. Like I said, I think I want to reuse this form, so I'm really happy that I can. And now let's see if we can get the slab up. So there's a ton of silicone holding it down, so I'm going to go ahead and try and pull some of that off. But first I'm going to cut this sharp bit of resin overflow just so I don't cut myself. So I've just pulled away some of the silicone, enough that I can get this off the form. And here it is. I am so chuffed that this has worked. Of course, there's a long way to go to finish this, but absolutely, like, this is a game changer, having to be able to cast in form. You could cut out like literally any shape, any form. And if you don't have one of these HDPE forms for the bottom of it, you could use an acrylic sheet, I suppose, or melamine and then tape it. But yeah, so this I am so pleased with. So what I'm doing is just getting the bulk of the silicone out. I mean, I could directly go on to sanding this, which I will in a minute anyway, but I just thought I'm going to get most of it out. It was quite satisfying to pull out in any case, and then I can move on to some sanding. Now, my newest bit in my tools is this lumberjack dust collector, and I cannot tell you how much of a lifesaver this is in my garage, because my garage floor was literally covered with sanding dust, and having this is a lifesaver, because now as I'm sanding it, I can just hold this close to my sander and it is sucking away all that dust. And as you can see, it's not even coming up to my hand. And previously, every time I've sanded epoxy or wood, I have been covered in the dust and all of it. So super happy. I do have a discount code for lumberjack tools as well, so I'm going to leave that in the description. But for now, back to some more sanding. So I've sanded the bottom, and now I'm just scuffing up the top because we are going to flood coat this. So I'm not going too aggressive on it, but I do want it scuffed off enough so that we have a nice bond of the new layer of epoxy. Okay, so now for finishing this, I'm actually going to finish both the sides, the front and the back, and I'm going to start with the back. So what I'm doing now is putting on an edge of liquid latex on the front, and this way when I pour resin on the back, it's not going to leave any drips on the front, and then I can just pour resin on the front and finish that, if that makes sense. So I'm using liquid latex. You could use PVA glue, that works just fine, and it's probably cheaper to use as well. But I had some really old liquid latex line that I'm trying to finish, so that's what I'm using. And I'm just going to spread this around with my fingers, wait for it to dry, and then I can go ahead and do a flood coat on the back side. Okay, so once I have flood coated the back, it is time to take off the latex and finish off the top. So I have gone ahead and peeled off my latex and I'm ready for my final top coat on this piece. I love to use my hands when I'm doing a top coat just because it lets me know exactly that I have covered the entire surface of the resin, and yeah, I also just find it quite relaxing to use my hands. But I do have a full video on how to get the perfect finish doing a top coat, so make sure you go check that out. And finally, this is what this looks like. Absolutely in love with this piece. It is so chunky, it is so fabulous. Absolutely love those colors, and I think it would make like a nice tray for perfumes and, you know, jewelry, like just to have on your vanity. So yeah, I'm so happy this foam technique has worked. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think of it, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye.